everyone, I'm Cassius and welcome back to the Shakespeare Minute. Today I am going to examine a speech from Henry IV Part 1, taking advantage of a new clip that the BBC just released from The Hollow Crown. Here is Shakespeare's speeches, Henry IV berating Prince Hal. In Henry IV Part 1, Act 3, Scene 2, King Henry IV dresses down his wild, hard-drinking heir, Prince Hal. There is a rebellion afoot. Henry is angry at, and kept awake at night by, the idea that his legacy, so recently established, is about to go to hell in a handbasket. The basic idea is this. The rebel Hotspur, about the same age as the prince, seems to be much more the iconic leader than the prince, and the king is freaking out that the people love Hotspur more. By the way, the prince and Hotspur are only the same age in the play. Historically, Hotspur was mad old, but we'll let that slide because this story is better. The king knows how fragile kingship is. Ah, the joys of being a usurper. And he likens the man he overthrew, Richard II, to Hal, and himself, the victorious usurper, to Hotspur. He thinks that rebellion will succeed again the way it did when he was victorious over Richard. Before I rip this speech into itty-bitty shreds, let's watch Jeremy Irons just own this speech, and his son, Tom Hiddleston.
By being seldom seen, I could not stir, but like a comet I was wondered at, that men would tell their children, this is he. The skipping king, he ambled up and down with shallow jesters and rash bavin wits, mingled his royalty with capering fools, enfeoffed himself to popularity. So when he had occasion to be seen, he was but as the cuckoo is in June, heard, not regarded. And in that very line, Harry, standest thou.
Oh, that was good, but that's for Friday. Today I am here to talk about Shakespeare, not my own obsessive fangirliness over Uncle Scar, and Loki. Stay tuned though, because that is going to be good. At any rate, the speech seems to be neatly done. Henry is angry. That's it. He makes this analogy, and we're done here, right? Wrong. Henry is a powerful king, and with that gravitas, it's easy to see him as a stodgy father trying to pull his son back into the fold. But here in this speech, he refers back to the events of the earlier play, Richard II, which sadly doesn't get nearly as much stage time as Henry IV Part 1 for a whole host of silly reasons. But the play, Richard II, does exist, and we can look at it. And when we do, we see that Henry is misremembering lots of his own past, whether willfully or not. He's a sad, damaged man, desperately clinging to a time when he was on the upswing, not the downswing. And in this desperation, he fundamentally misconstrues a lot of how he became king. Every time he gets something kind of right, he gets a lot of motivation wrong. Let's break it down into the two sides of his argument, shall we? Number one, Henry claims that he carefully managed his appearances in public, trying to remain aloof and like a comet. While Henry often did have rousingly successful public appearances on his way to taking the crown, as told by both ally and enemy in Richard II, he was distinctly liable to slum with the commoners, which Richard found ridiculous. He was a good glad-hander, not a comet-like vision of awe, rhetoric much more applicable to the glorious Richard who looked like a king even as he was stripped of dignity and power, and had sun metaphors applied to him all the freaking time. Celestial objects apply to Richard II, as, by the way, they do to Prince Hal. Number two, Henry claims that Richard was too free with his discourse, tiring people of paying any attention to him. While Richard did ally with people who flattered him, this had an insulating effect, not a tiring one. Richard was too aloof and unable to hear from people. Yes, this did lead to him losing his political power, but never his personal power. Richard was always regarded, always had a charisma that Henry will never have. So ultimately, Henry is not correct here about what caused Richard's downfall. Hal, by being out among the people, is actually cultivating a political ploy that will vault him into sun-like, awe-inspiring power when he takes the court by surprise. And he will also have that political touch that his father was able to cultivate, even if his father was unable to remember how exactly he did that. Prince Hal is on his way to combining the strengths of his two predecessors, and Henry is so desperate to be someone he isn't that he won't even credit himself with the strengths that he rightly has. Henry is scared here, and Hal reassures him. That is what happens in this scene. Henry is not whipping his son into shape. He's not telling Hal a lot of great, correct new information that he's too young to really know. Henry is simply scared, and in fact, often wrong in what he actually says. This play is great, but whenever people foreshadow or call back, it's critical to look at those other plays to get the full context. This play is drowning in context. Hotspur, that rebel, was a young man in the pro-Henry IV camp during Richard's reign, and that informs a lot of how bitterly he feels Henry IV's wrongs against him. And the scene where Hal and Falstaff play act as the king and prince and then switch places aggressively foreshadows the later parts of Henry IV Part II. This play does not exist in a vacuum, and this speech especially doesn't. Shakespeare characters, no matter how much gravitas they have, can be wrong. And with all that seriousness out of the way, this Friday, I am going to review the glorious 2 minutes of Henry and Hal that this clip today was taken from. The Hollow Crown, coming out on the BBC super soon, people. Get excited. Seriously. Get excited. For the Shakespeare Minute, I'm Cassius. Till next time, think of the world. Henry IV Part 1 clip is great, and I will be digging into it on Friday, but you have to see the trailer for the full Hollow Crown. That is what the BBC is calling the entire Henry ad, and I have linked to it here below the video. Just do it. It is 60 seconds long, and I literally burst into tears at the end. I wept like an 11-year-old fangirl in the American Idol audience. Watch this immediately. Your eyes and ears and heart and brain will thank you. If you don't go into Shakespeare shock, try to identify as many scenes as you can.